Parsha 101, Parshas Vayeitzei. The name of this week's Torah portion comes from the first word of the first verse. Vayeitzei Yaakov Beersheva Harana. Yaakov went out from Beersheva and he went to Haran. Beersheva, he is now leaving his parents after maneuvering into getting the blessings. In last week's Torah portion, and Esav is furious and wants to kill him, Rivka tells Yitzchak tells him, go to your mother's family and go get married. So it says that he went out because Yaakov's a tzaddik. When a tzaddik's in a place, he brings glory and praise, etc. to a place. So when he leaves, a lot of that goes with him. Now, Yaakov on the way to going to Haran, which is Rivka's family and her brother Lava and etc., he knows he's got to fortify himself spiritually for it. So commentaries say he spent the next 14 years in the yeshiva of Aver. It would have been the yeshiva Shem and Aver, Shem the son of Noach, but by that time he had passed on, so he spent 14 years in the yeshiva of Aver. When he had set out, Esav knew he couldn't go after him, so instead he sent his son Eliphaz. He tells him, go take care of your uncle. So he goes, he chases him down, and all of a sudden he catches up to Yaakov, and now he has got a dilemma. On the one hand, he wants to do what his father told him to do. He wants to honor his father. At the same time, he grew up in his grandfather's home, and he knows he's not supposed to just kill people. So he's like, Yaakov, uncle, what am I supposed to do here? So Yaakov says, if you take everything from me, a dead person, poor person, someone who's totally destitute is kind of like a dead person, so you'll basically have fulfilled it. So Yaakov was now stripped of everything, so he's going to end up showing up. He's got nothing. He's got not a penny to his name. So Yaakov, when he's now going to resume his travels and finally go to Haran, it says that he stopped at the place. And what's the place? The place is Har HaMoriah, the place where the whole sacrifice of Yitzchak didn't happen, and also the place where the Beis HaMikdash was going to be built. So that's why it's a specific the place. It says he prayed the evening prayer here because each of the forefathers instituted a different prayer, as in prayer was around, but Avram instituted morning prayer, Yitzchak instituted afternoon prayer, and Yaakov instituted evening prayer. Then he says they took a bunch of stones and he surrounded his head to go to sleep. And all the stones started bickering. They all want to be around the tzaddik's head, so they all became one stone, etc. And he ended up setting up that stone as a monument, kind of like an altar to God. But there's this whole thing that's going on here now. He's leaving home, which is a spiritual haven, and is going to Haran, which is entering into a very material world. So, true, he's leaving the spiritual haven, but he's going to the material world, the world that now needs to be elevated. And he could achieve much greater heights in facing down the challenges the material world would have for him, and in elevating the material world, because that's where the real purpose of creation can be fulfilled. So Yaakov is now on Har HaMoriah. He's at the place, and he's got a dream. And in the dream, there's a ladder it's planted in the ground and diagonally reaching upward. And he sees angels going up and down the ladder, because angels that had accompanied him to the border of the land of Israel were not going to go up, and new angels were going to come down to accompany him the rest, once he was going to leave the land of Israel, the rest of the way. And he sees that Hashem is standing over him. He's standing at the top over there, and God tells him, I'm the Lord, I'm the God of Avram and Yitzchak. He gives all the promises that your children are going to inherit this land, your descendants are going to be like the dust of the earth, etc. It says you're going to spread out west and even north and south. And the word spread out, as in ufaratzta, it comes from the word of not just like to spread out, but to break through. So it's sort of saying the spiritual message that you're carrying now is going to break through to the rest of the world. It will be heard eventually. And ufaratzta, the name for it, there's the name that comes from it is the name of Peretz, and like to burst out. And this is the name actually of the great grandfather of Mashiach, so harkens to messianic times when the message will be all over. And he continues with the blessings that all the families of the world are going to be blessed through you and your family. Know that I'm going to be with you wherever you go, etc. So Yaakov awakens and is like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I went to sleep here in this holy place. So God is truly present here. This is definitely the house of the Lord, of God, the Lord, etc. And this is for sure the gateway of prayer to heaven. So of course people could pray anywhere, but like this is kind of a fast track place to pray. Again, that's where the Beis HaMikdash was going to be built, the holy temple. And so he sets up the stone as a monument, he makes an altar there, etc. He makes a vow, God's going to be with me, I'm going to do all that I'm supposed to be doing. This is going to be a house of God. I'm going to give 10%, I'm going to tithe to God, etc. You guys have like also this whole Chassidic commentary going along with all this stuff that he's doing here is because there's two different ways of transforming the world. And we have to bring light to the world. We have to make it a home for God. So one way of transforming the world is doing holy things, which is actually aligns with the soul's natural inclination. The soul, which is a godly being, wants to connect with, unite with God. So doing things that are holy are way up its alley. But there's another type of way of transforming the world, and that is to actually sanctify and elevate the mundane, which is that's kind of more towards the body's natural inclination, but that's not the soul's natural inclination. It's not, let's go jump into the mundane world. But through, again, facing it down and overcoming the challenges and still sanctifying and elevating the mundane world, this actually brings God the most pleasure. Because this, in many ways, goes against what our natural inclination is to go out into the world and turn into a godly world. That's why so more pleasure comes from it. So Yaakov now goes east, and he goes to a place called Aram Naharaim, and he sees there's a well, and there's a couple shepherds hanging out there with their flocks, and there's a massive boulder sitting on top of the well. And he looks at them and he's like, yo, peoples, where are you from? And they're like, we're from Haran. And he's like, well, that's good. Do you know Lavan? Yep, we know Lavan. And is he well? Is that good with him? Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, look over there. His daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep. So different explanations. Some say Lavan was really not doing well financially, so he couldn't necessarily hire other shepherds, other that he didn't have any sons at that time. So his daughters had to take care of the flocks. Or maybe just nobody wanted to work for him because he was known as being deceitful, etc. So then Yaakov looks at the shepherds like, hey, how come you guys are all sitting around here? Like, the day is still young. You should be pasturing the flocks, or why are you here? And they're like, look, you see, we got this boulder is on the well, and we need all of us have to roll it off together. So we're waiting for more people to come. At that point, Rachel actually arrives. Rachel shows up, and Yaakov rolls off the boulder, displaying great strength, and just rolls it off. And then he waters Rachel's flocks, etc. And then he says that he embraces her, he kisses her, and he cries. So some explanations say because, like Rashi, that in the future he saw that they were going to be married, but they would not be buried together. Another much deeper Hasidic explanation of this is that Rachel represents the spiritual source of all the Jewish souls. That was kind of like she was the larger representation of that. Yaakov's attribute that he represented was mercy, because we have from last time with Yitzchak and the digging wells, Avram was all about chesed, kindness, giving. Yitzchak was about strength, severity, like self-discipline. And Yaakov, Rachamim, compassion, is the perfect blend of kindness and severity. So that's what Yaakov was. So Yaakov, this whole thing that he's crying over Rachel right now, is that Rachel, the source of all the Jewish souls, Yaakov is crying to he wants to enlist some mercy on all these souls that have to come down into the world, and he's trying to arouse divine compassion upon them and the descent. Anyways, then, so they have the introductions, and he says, I'm going to be your father's equal. If your father's going to treat me with deception, I'll treat him with deception, but he's going to treat me like a brother, then I'm going to treat him like a brother. No, we're going to be honest with each other. I'm going to match him. Don't worry. Rachel runs to tell Lavan. It says she told Lavan because her mother wasn't alive. And Lavan hears this. It's like, wait a second. I remember when this family came for my sister, and the camels and the wealth and everything that came with it. So he kind of runs out to greet Yaakov, but he's really trying to see, okay, what did he bring with him? That doesn't see anything. He's like, oh, it was probably hidden about his person. So he embraces him. He's basically giving him a full pat down. Like, maybe it's in his pocket. Maybe it's in his mouth right now. And etc. And then he's like, okay, so what's the deal? He realizes he doesn't have anything on him. So Yaakov explains, and he says, okay, well, you know what? I guess because you're family, I'm not going to turn you out. He says, he figured out, okay, for the next month, he's going to work as a shepherd, and then he says, fine, what's your payment going to be? So Torah tells us Lavan had 2 daughters. Some say they were twins, but he had 2 daughters, Leah and Rachel. Leah, it says that her eyes were weak. Some say it actually means that she was beautiful through her eyes, but the general idea was Leah's eyes were weak because everyone said, oh, look, one sibling's got 2 girls, the other sibling has 2 boys. So the oldest and the oldest, the youngest. And Leah did not want to get stuck with Esav, so she was crying in prayer to revoke that. So Yaakov, it says that Rachel was beautiful in appearance, beautiful in her face and her figure. She was beautiful. Yaakov loved Rachel, and so he tells them very specifically, I want to marry your younger daughter Rachel. And he gives very specific details. So he shouldn't be like, I want to marry your daughter Rachel. And then Lavan will turn around and be like, look, Leah, your name is Rachel now. Now, even with that, Lavan still tricked him. And he anticipated that, so he gave Rachel signs. These are going to be the secret signs we're going to have. And of course, the story goes, well, we're about to find out. So Lavan was like, well, I guess better you than somebody else. Fine. So you can work 7 years now, and then you can marry Rachel. And it says that Yaakov, because of his love for Rachel, the years flew by just like days. And then Lavan makes a whole big party, and then of course he pulls the switch. And he gives Leah to Yaakov instead of Rachel. And Rachel, realizing that her sister is about to be embarrassed in front of everybody if she doesn't know these secret signs, willingly gives the signs to her sister. And this is why Yaakov doesn't realize right away that a switch was pulled. And it also says that Laban had 2 daughters by concubines, so they were like sort of his daughters, but they didn't have full status, kind of as Leah and Rachel. So he's going to give them as handmaids to his daughters. So that's Bilhah and Zilpah, but Zilpah was the younger one. So he gave Zilpah, the younger one, to Leah, so it should look like she was Rachel. So he really thought out the whole deceit situation. Anyways, Yaakov finds out and he goes to Laban and he's like, what'd you do here? And Laban starts like, oh, it's not our custom here to marry off the younger before the older. So you know what, we'll finish this week of celebration and then you'll marry Rachel and then you work another 7 years. Now, really, the forefathers kept the whole Torah. And even though it hadn't officially been given yet, but the Torah, of course, was still around. And it's a prohibition not to marry 2 sisters. So we see that the Yaakov did. So what's going on here? So because the Torah hadn't officially been given yet, the observance was a voluntary observance of the Torah mitzvahs. However, Yaakov had promised Rachel that he would marry her. So this obligation to keep his promise at this point overruled this voluntary observance of the Torah they had taken upon himself. Of course, once the Torah had been given, the same consideration cannot be given. So this just goes to show. Now, so Yaakov marries both of them and he sets up his main household is going to be with Rachel. Because he loved her more than Rachel. And it says that God sees that Leah felt, she wasn't hated, but she the commentary says it's not like she was actually hated, but she felt like she was the hated one just because of Yaakov's overwhelming love for Rachel. And now Leah falls pregnant, she's going to give birth. She has her first son, Reuven, she has a son, Shimon, and she has Levi. So 1, 2, 3, she's got 3 sons. And there's each of the 12 tribes that are born, there's explanations given for each of why their names are what they are. But not to go into that here, but that's all within the text. But there's an interesting thing that Reuven comes from the language of seeing. And on a deeper level, this represents when you see, you draw close to something, and this is indicative of love of God. Shimon, the next son, this is a language of hearing, like Shema Yisrael, hearing. Hearing represents some sort of distance. And this is indicative of a fear of God, because there's a little bit of distance separation. This is where fear can come in. Levi, it actually says when Levi was born, it says, and his name was called, and he called the name, and this is because it says that God himself named Levi, and he sent the angel Gabriel, with 24 gifts of the priesthood to Levi, because he was going to be the father of the priests down the line. But Levi is a name of attachment, of wanting to connect with attachment in that kind of way to somebody. And then after that, Leah has Yehuda. And Yehuda comes from the name of Hodu, of thanks, an acknowledgement. So once love of God and fear of God and attachment of God, now there's a whole new level of transcendence that can be achieved. And this comes from acknowledgement, comes from humility. So humbling the self allows also a person to reach greater heights. Putting the self aside now means that you can now connect to something that is above and beyond what your own limitations are. Also, when Leah has Yehuda, she says, now I can thank God, which seems, well, why you're not thanking God for the other 3 sons is because the mothers knew, Rachel knew that Yaakov was going to have 12 sons. And she did the math, there were going to be 4 wives. She knew there were going to be 4 wives. So now, so each of them will have 3 sons. But now she has Yehuda, and she's like, wait, now I've been given more than I was supposed to have. And I've been getting an extra one. So this is now an extra level of thanks now. Now, Rachel sees what's going on. Leah's just got 4 sons now. And Rachel's tells Yaakov, that's it, you got to give me children. It's like I'm dead. And Yaakov gets upset. He's like, what are you talking? First of all, why are you talking like this? Second of all, I have children. You're the one that children have been withheld from. So, the whole context of what you're saying here, and basically they decide, okay, well, maybe we have to do like the whole thing with Avram and Sarah. Sarah gave her maidservant to Avram. So I'll do the same thing. I'll give the maidservant to Yaakov, and her maidservant was Bilhah, and then that way I'll raise her children, and it'll be like I have kids. So she does it, and Bilhah now has 2 children, Dan and Naphtali. And Leah sees this, and she's like, okay, and I'll give Zilpah, my maidservant, to Yaakov, which is now how we end up with the 4 wives. So Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, Zilpah. And then Zilpah has 2 sons, Gad and Asher. So we now have 8 of the 12 tribes are now born. Then it says a story that happened. It says Reuven was about actually 5 years old at the time of the story. It says he was walking one day during the time of the wheat harvest, and he found mandrakes, or they say maybe it was jasmine. Whatever it was, he finds them. And it just also says in praise of him that there was a wheat harvest or stuff going all over the place, but he didn't take anything that belonged to anyone. He took wildflowers that were growing, just to show the sort of honesty he gets from his father in the house that he was raised in. And so he took some. He took some for his mother, brings them to Leah, and they say that she was going to use this as a potion for fertility because she had her sons, but she still wanted to have more children. She got daughters, etc. So Rachel says she wants some. And Leah's like, well, now it's one thing that you have my husband, he set up his main home with you, but now you want to take the flowers that my son brought me? And so Rachel's like, well, it's Yaakov's turn to sleep with me tonight, but he'll go with you tonight. So when Yaakov comes home from work, Leah's like, well, I bought you with the flowers, basically. And now she gives birth to 2 more sons, Yisachar and Zevulun. Well, one after, they're not twins, but one after she becomes, now, after that, she now has 6 sons. And Bilhah has 2 sons, and Zilpah has 2 sons. So there's only 2 more tribes left to be born. And then Leah falls pregnant again. And she does the math, and she realizes, if I have another boy, then Rachel will not even have equal amount of sons to the maidservants. And she'll be lesser. And I can't let that happen. So she prays that the child, she was pregnant with a boy, that should be a girl. So her name's Dinah, from the word of din, that she passed judgment on herself, that this boy should be a girl. So she has the daughter Dinah. And now at this point, it says now God remembers Rachel, and Rachel now falls pregnant, and she has a son, and she names him Yosef. And she says, at this point, now God has taken away my disgrace, etc. Just interesting, because Rashi commentaries say, what does it mean, like, take away my disgrace? Because it says once a mother has a child, she could blame stuff on him. Like, hey, who broke this? Oh, your son did it. Who ate the last cookie? Oh, your son did it. Anyway, so now 11 of the 12 tribes are born. And at this point now, Yaakov realizes that it's time to go. It's time to get out. And Lavan's like, no, you have to stay. God blessed me because of you. He realized Lavan became very wealthy with Yaakov working for him. It says that now he had sons, etc. And Yaakov's like, no, I got it. It's time to get out. So, okay, what's your payment? So, I worked faithfully for you all the years, etc. And your flocks increased, etc., etc. And so they make this whole deal about all the between the goats and the lambs and this one that have white rings on them and splotches and blotches and blah, 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 blah. A whole thing that they decide. So Lavan's like, okay, fine. So basically he separates the flocks, and he takes all the ones of the splotches and the blotches with him. And he separates them by 3 days. So he's like, okay, great. Any new ones that are born could be yours. A whole situation. Yaakov is an expert master breeder. And he has this whole thing with sticks and stripes, and he peels the bark of these, the aspen and hazel and chestnut branches, basically so that the sheep, they're going to look at it and now they're going to reproduce according to what the patterns on the sticks are. And when this happens, so the flocks grow, and then Lavan see what's going on, so then he changes the term of the agreement, so there's a lot of back and forth that goes on now, and a whole lesson in breeding, etc. The bottom line is that Lavan's going to keep trying to trick Yaakov out of what he should get, because he sees the blessings are growing and growing. And each time God looking out for Yaakov, and whatever the agreement is between the goats and the lambs, it's all going to turn out anyways in Yaakov's favor. Then it says that basically Lavan's sons Yaakov becomes very, very wealthy, and he gets camels and donkeys and maidservants and flocks and all this kind of stuff. And then Lavan's sons start trashing him that, oh, look, he appropriated our father's wealth, and everything he's got is because our father is so wealthy, and blah, blah, blah. And Yaakov realizes, okay, there's an attitude shift that's occurring here right now. And then Hashem comes to Yaakov, and he says, that's it. It's time to get out. It's time to go home. So Yaakov calls Rachel and Leah, and he's like, look, your father's attitude to me has changed. He's changed our agreement 100 times about payment to me. And, we got to get out of here. God said it's time to go. So they both respond like, do we have a share in our father's house anymore? Look at the way he's treated us. Look at the way he married us off. Whatever God says, let's go. Vamonos, basically. Let's get out of here. So they pack up, and they're going to get ready to leave. It says Lavan went to shear his sheep, so he's several days away. It says that Rachel actually swiped her father's idols, and they pack everything up and they flee. They get out. So eventually Lavan finds out about it. It takes a couple days. Then he gives chase a couple days. So a week later, on day 7, he catches up to them. And the night before, he's got a dream that Hashem tells him, be careful what you say to Yaakov. Just be careful what you do here. So when Lavan comes, he catches up to Yaakov and he's like, oh, why did you leave? And you took away my daughters like prisoners of war. I would have sent you off, in such style with music and everything. And also, by the way, why'd you take my gods also? And so Yaakov is like, what are you talking about? First of all, we had to run away because I thought you'd take your daughters back by force. Second of all, I got nothing to do with your idols. So anybody here who took your idols will not live. And he said this, he did not know that Rachel had taken them. And because he said this, Rachel is going to, she's going to die on the way home. So he tells Lavan, look, go look through all this stuff. So Lavan goes and rummages around through everything. And of course, he doesn't find anything. Also because Rachel had taken the idols, she was sitting on them. So Lavan's like, yo, stand up. And she's like, oh, I can't. It's the way of the women on me right now. I can't stand up. So he doesn't find them. And Yaakov's like, come on. So Yaakov finally turns around on Lavan and unleashes him. Like, why are you driving us crazy? What's going on here? 20 years I worked for you. I didn't sleep. I was in the cold and the heat. And, I never brought you a maimed animal or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why are you treating me like this? I was a model worker for you and everything, look at how rich you got off of me, basically. So I was like, okay, fine, fine. Let's make a covenant right now. So they set up a stone monument, and they call this as Galed. I was like, look, God's the only one who can keep an eye on both of us. If you don't treat my daughters right, then he's coming after you. And this is going to be the witness now that no one's going to cross over here with any hostile intent toward the other. So then they have a meal, and then Lavan stays the night, and then the next morning he gets up and he kisses everybody and he says his goodbye and he goes off on his way. Yaakov now also continues. He's gone back to his father's house. He's traveling toward Israel, etc. And he sees angels are coming toward him now. And he says, oh, this is definitely God's camp. And he names the place Bacharaim. And that is the end of this week's Torah portion. Next week's Torah portion starts with the showdown, meeting up with Asa.